these folks are all innovators, one way or another. And I'm gonna basically introduce you from, let's see, your left to your right, starting with the guy on the TV, Brent Grinna, who's in Boston, and we're gonna have to figure out how the technology works because he's on by Skype. And Brent, Zoom, sorry. Skype's other brother. But Brent, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but Brent is a Postville guy, lives in Boston. I would call you, Brent, a serial entrepreneur in many different ways, but you also spend time both on the East Coast and the Turkey River, or the Mississippi River coast, because you got a place in McGregor. So Brent, could you weigh in just a second and tell me what connectivity means to you?
Big wave if you can hear me okay. And I also want to acknowledge, as I've discussed with Sarah, if we have any connection issues, it's because the internet in Boston is not as good as the internet in Northeast Iowa. So I just want to set that straight. Look, the connectivity has been really transformational for me, both professionally and personally. Just a little bit of context, we work here right in downtown Boston, not far from South Station, if you've ever been here. And I have about 50 colleagues on my team at EverTrue. We're a software company that serves the higher education fundraising sector. Some of our clients include University of Iowa and Coe College. But one thing that has really evolved for us, even since starting the company in 2010, that at that time and for the early years of our company, we were essentially 100% in Boston. All of my workforce was here. In 2019, we have around 20% of our workforce is now remote. We have colleagues in Charleston, South Carolina, in Hudson River Valley, in Rochester, New York, in Washington, D.C. And so I think that at a time when technologies like Zoom, which we're using right now, just had an IPO. It's one of the most successful IPOs of the year. There's been this confluence of, millennials like me emerging into leadership positions, being really comfortable with technology, and being more than willing to even try things like the conversation we're having today. And so about 18 months ago, my wife and I, we have 3 little kids. We were really wanting to be able to plant some roots back in Northeast Iowa. She grew up outside of Cedar Rapids. We met at Sports Unlimited Campground in Prairie du Chien, got married at the Villa Louis. And so that area has been a big part of our lives. And so, one of the considerations in deciding to make an investment in doing some real estate projects in the area was whether I'd be able to work remotely if we're going to be able to spend time there. And so it was an absolute thrill to find out that there was literally better internet available in McGregor than I had in my neighborhood in Boston. And it has really made it feasible for us to spend many weeks now of the year, as we were last weekend in Northeast Iowa. So I'll pause there, but thrilled to get to know everyone remotely. And would like to applaud Sarah for being able to take a risk and even try doing something like a video panel, which it would have been a lot easier not even to try. So it's great to see so many smiling faces.
Well, thank you for joining us today and taking time out of your day. I'm going to go to the opposite end because Brent mentioned the ability to work remotely, and I know Jackie Lee does that. Jackie and I met a few months ago talking about community in Guttenberg, and so when I heard that she was going to be one of our panelists, I was excited to have her. So thanks for being here.
Good morning. I work in Clayton, Iowa, a population of 86. I Zoom every morning with my agency liaison in Las Vegas, Nevada. Technically, we jump online probably around 8 o'clock every morning. We run through some Google Analytics for performance of our web page. We share screens back and forth. He recently produced a new video for us for our sand business. And the amount of time that it took us to produce that and launch it was cut in, I don't know, even the amount of time that we cut down. But if you think about 5 years ago, we would have had to piece together the video. He would either then burn it to a DVD, send it to me, or a jump drive. I would install it, I would watch it, I would send him back changes by phone, by email. Now he pulls it up on his screen, I watch it, we comment real time, real screen via Zoom, make the changes, and it's ready to go within a matter of minutes versus a matter of months. So I take for granted that we have technology. It's an expectation when I wake up in the morning that it's going to work. When it doesn't, it's incredibly frustrating. You might as well just go home for the day, and yeah. So if I'm not in Clayton, I'm at home in Guttenberg doing what I do.
That's the whole point, is that connectivity gives you the option of working where you choose to work. It's a quality of life thing, isn't it?
Well, it's totally a quality of life. I was in Waterloo for a large casino company, and the company that I was working for was bought out, and my husband works for Pattison and 3M and was not willing to move, and so I said, okay, look, I have to find a job locally, and how am I going to do that in rural Iowa? Somewhere between Dubuque and Pattison, Wisconsin, and my mother lives in Guttenberg. It was a perfect place for us, and because of technology, I'm able to do what I do there, and without it, it wouldn't be possible.
Well, thanks again for being here. Adam Pollock is next from Fire Farm. I was on your website, and I was blown away by A, the work you do, but B, the way the website told your story. Talk about what connectivity means for you as an innovator and in some ways a disruptor.
Thank you. That was very generous of you. We have kind of a unique story because we started our company in 1991 in Oakland, California, which is part of the San Francisco Bay Area, and the dot-com boom was occurring just then. Really, the reason we ended up in Elkader was twofold. One is quality of life. That was the primary reason. We discovered Elkader because my wife's family had a historic connection to the town. She'd never been here. She visited. We fell in love with it. The second reason we were able to do that and make that transition was because Alpine here, quite frankly. The internet was evolving to a place where you could transfer images and you could communicate with other people through email. It was just turning and becoming viable. The speeds were getting to be a place that made that possible. And like Brent, the connectivity in Oakland was worse than it was here. And from that day on, that has been critical to us being able to be here. Like you said, you can be anywhere. For us as a manufacturer, being in a small town in Iowa is far better than trying to compete for space and staff in Oakland, California.
Tell me about your customer base, because it's clearly not a Clayton County focused retail organization. I mean, if you're based here, I suspect your customers are worldwide?
They are, and in some ways our workforce also, like Brent. The rumor mill started flying when they heard that a lighting company was going to move to small town Elkader, and how are you going to survive selling lamps in Elkader? But our company deals with interior designers and architects around the world, mostly the United States, but we do work and ship everywhere. We do all of our manufacturing in Elkader here. We found the thing that most surprised me perhaps was the amount of resources and support out here, both from the state. Mark back there is working with Cirrus, and right now, even now, we're evolving. We've constantly changed as a company, and we're working with programs with the state to make us better and to allow us to grow. The workforce that comes to work every day can walk to work, and most of them live in town. And they've been with us for a long time because of that same quality of life that's possible out here. In terms of technology and how we've used technology, even as of this past month, Brent, we're in competition now because we just opened a bed and breakfast in town here, or a bed and bath, I should say, no breakfast. And we posted it on Airbnb, and 3 days later I had my first booking. so that we didn't even get a sign out in front. I still don't have a sign, and we've already got multiple bookings happening. So that gives you an idea of the reach and the speed at which the technology and internet has made things possible. And another way that we are using technology is additive manufacturing. So we, in the next month, will be releasing a new product line that is 3D printed. So we will have a bank of 3D printers, and we are actually creating lampshades that are printed on demand. We literally, if everything falls into place, we could design on the computer a product, take those images, render them into an environment, put it online, be selling it the same day, print a first prototype that afternoon, and successfully print and ship a product the next day, brand new. That's a one-day product development term. We have no inventory except for a spool of material. We can customize a product for different online retailers. We can now become competitive again with overseas manufacturing because those online retailers do not need to carry inventory. They don't have to wait for it to come from overseas. And our cost of production has come down. And we can leverage our staff because one person can manage multiple printers. So that's an example of technology and how that's really changed the possibilities of manufacturing even here in the United States and being competitive internationally.
We'll dive into the opportunity to be in a town like Elkader and have a global business coming up. But you all got to meet Ketaki Poyekar during her comments during the first session and her journey from India to Iowa. Talk about your company and talking about great websites. You have another spectacular website because that's the business you're in at Studio Ketaki.
Yep. Well, thank you for saying that my website is great. That's what I help businesses find, their vision, their purpose, and consulting them to find how they can approach their audience without being there. So that's what I do, and every day internet is a big part of life. I live on internet to connect with my family back home in India, and sending files, design files are large if you know that. Sending those, getting on meetings, like Jackie said, Zoom is great to share screens, quick edits, like you're right there, It really helps a lot. And I wouldn't have imagined being here in such a rural part and doing this business. Now people are finding me. I have clients from Oakland, California to Boston, New York, Florida, and I'm sitting in middle of Iowa. Like, they just find me somewhere on the internet.
So let's say theoretically you're one of the have-nots in a town that doesn't have spectacular service. Would you be in business today?
I don't think so. Because people can't find you if you are not connected with the internet. It is very important. Right? Example, yesterday, some company, Vest Cover, contacted me to put the murals that we did. I'm one of the muralists. To put it on their platform so people can find it on their platform. All it does is it's a huge map, puts pins on where these murals are, and they wanted me to put art here on that map, and it's just good for Elkader too. So again, people of Elkader like tourism, and that's what we were planning to get out. Art in the Alley program is to get people to visit, and that was my part, that adding a hashtag to the mural would help Elkader be on the larger map of the world and find it. And I think it worked because this company somehow found me and they want me to put our murals on it. So yeah.
Well, thanks for being here this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Lavern Bird is with MercyOne Elkader. I should mention one of my other hats that I wear is I'm a hospital trustee. I sit on both the Unity Point Grinnell board. I'm the chair there. And because I'm the chair in Grinnell, I sit on the MercyOne Des Moines board as well. So I have a little insight into the world of healthcare.
I did not know that.
In a rural community. And we talked about it during Ron's session. Barriers to healthcare in rural places are really focused on three things: reimbursement rates, volume, we have fewer people, so there's often less business, and recruitment and retention of healthcare professionals. And what's happening in telemedicine right now is really fascinating, but it's sort of subservient to your connectivity. And I was wondering if you'd tell us a little bit about what you're doing as far as providing healthcare services to folks using doctors who may be, we were in Clarion yesterday. The lieutenant governor spoke to a physician in Paris, France, who was providing internal medicine services to the hospital in Clarion. She turned the camera and showed us the Eiffel Tower, but she was yet at the same time working with patients in Clarion. I assume you can do the same thing.
Yes, and thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. Our CEO, Brooke Kensinger, can't be here today, and she sends her best to those at the summit today. So we have embraced technology, our CEO and MercyOne, for rural healthcare. Because of that connectivity, we're able to provide services that keep patients or the citizens of the community local to Elkader, so they don't have to travel unless they need a specialist referral. So we have many different systems. We have Avera is our big one. They're out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And like Ron had said earlier, rural healthcare is very challenging. It's probably one of the most challenging jobs I've had, but I absolutely love it to pieces. I wouldn't do anything else. We have Avera eMergency. So you push a button, the screen comes on, you're connected automatically to a hub in Sioux Falls, South Dakota with a registered nurse and another physician that works, they work in the ER about 75% of their time. So they're very well versed on practice and what's going on. We use it for anything related to STEMI or trauma or heart failure. Anything we want to use, just push the button, they come on the screen. They can help us with many different things. They can do the documentation. They can help run a code if we need them to. They can help call for a helicopter. Those are things that are really essential to us because time is everything when you have a critical life event. We also have e-care pharmacy, so we have an off-site pharmacist that can electronically verify orders before we give the medicine to the patient. We also have integrated telehealth partners, which is behavioral health. You can actually have a psychiatrist do a consult with a behavioral health patient that's come to the ER, and then they help place that patient also. So they're doing the phone calls for beds, which frees us up. And recruitment and retention in a critical access hospital is critical. I know it's kind of an oxymoron, a play on words, but it's very difficult to recruit and retain staff, providers, physicians. So when you have that connectivity to extra resources, we embrace it. It has transformed how we deliver care to the patient and the family when they come to the hospital. It's made a huge difference in outcomes.
I'm going to direct a little bit here.
Go ahead.
You know, when I was at USDA, I used to tell people that there were some keys to life in a small town. Place to live, the whole issue of housing, a good job, good paying job, strong community, clean water, things like that. One of the other challenges that I found out about was access to capital. And Brent, I wanted to come back to you for just a second because in addition to your work, let me stand out here so you can see me. Well, I'm not that short. You are also involved in some taking equity positions with a group of other partners in tech companies. We're actually seeing some movement in Iowa in some small towns where you're seeing tech companies emerge. From a perspective of someone who's interested not just in your company but in seeing other tech-based companies, what is the opportunity in rural places from your perspective, and how could equity flow into a startup or a tech-based company that wanted to locate in a place like Elkader?
Yeah, I think that the way that this likely evolves is how it's evolved at our company, which is initially we had our core office, and then as people advanced in their lives and wanted to move away, they started saying, "Hey, Brent, would it be okay if I moved to Rochester, New York to be close to family?" And the answer is absolutely. Why would I not want to retain an employee, whether they're in my office or at their home in Rochester? The odds are that we're messaging each other, we're texting, we're calling. There are a lot of days I don't even know where my colleagues are. I mean, I don't know on a given day who is in the office versus who's working from wherever. And so I think what's going to happen, Bill, is that as folks experience the benefits of flexible work arrangements, are able to move into communities like yours, I think you're then going to see, people start new organizations. I don't know if it'll be, the challenges around tech companies is you need a concentration of capital, and you need a concentration historically of human capital. And I think that the human capital piece is less of an issue as things like remote work become more common. The financial capital piece is still probably an area where tech centers, like Boston, have a big advantage. But I know there's been a bunch of work in Des Moines and in Cedar Rapids, and there are a lot of venture funds that are starting to look for opportunities. There's a fund called the Rise of the Rest Fund that was started by Steve Case, who is the CEO of AOL. And they are basically dedicated to investing not in Boston, San Francisco, Chicago, the big cities. They're specifically focused on smaller emerging markets. And so I feel like I frankly am still getting connected in the area, and I don't have a great sense of what kind of financial investment capital is out there. I'd love to talk about that with you further, Bill. I know Lyle Traster from McGregor is there, and we've been brainstorming projects that are at a scale that would require investors to come in and get behind it. And I don't know enough yet about the appetite for that sort of financial risk in the area, but I'm incredibly optimistic about the potential given everything we're talking about today.
I will be following up with you. I think that that's an opportunity for small towns, especially connected towns. I think about the city of West Liberty, which has gigabit service, and they have all of these software development companies on the upper stories of their downtown buildings, and the business owners have bought the buildings, and so they have a storefront downstairs, and upstairs is their company, and they've become a robust tech community thanks to the fact that they have gigabit service. Things like that can happen in places like this, where you have this amazing piece of infrastructure.
I am more than happy to have that conversation.
As long as they don't leave Iowa. That's true. Anybody can stay and work anywhere they want. That's part of this global economy. Jackie, I want to come back to you because I used the word disruption when I was mentioning Adam a second ago. What is it that's possible from your perspective, and even from your company's perspective, as far as turning current models upside down? What does connectivity and technology bring to us that we're not even seeing today? Do you have any sense of what could come next?
No. I think in terms of how far it's come, in the 80s, we were probably asking people if they had a fax machine. Then we asked, do you have an email address? Now there's the expectation that you have an email, but very little work is done that way. When you get up in the morning and you think about how you start your day, I'm venturing to say it's probably not through email. It's probably some form of social media. And it's just a very connected world and society. And without the broadband or the connectivity, none of that can happen. If you think about how the president, and regardless of which side of the fence you're on, influences the world through tweeting, I think that the way the world is moving, we can pretty much hang up the phone and the email, and we will all move to technology-based platforms. I know when I revised our website, and I think the previous speaker said that if your website isn't mobile enabled, you're in trouble. And I kind of find if you're not mobile enabled and you're going XYZ place. When's the last time you pulled up the website to somewhere you wanted to go? You don't, you Google it, right? And of course that's connected to the website. The website's like the dirt in the soil. If you don't have it, you're not gonna get to that location. But the bottom line is you Google everything you want in life, right? We're in the car the other night, we're gonna go out for dinner, never been to Backwoods in McGregor, put in the restaurant. Guess what? They don't have their hours listed. So I'm like, well, I'm not gonna drive there, so we went somewhere else. I mean, it's just that simple. If you're not there, you might as well hang it up.
Let me tell you a quick story about an industry in southeast Iowa. They just bought $1 million piece of machinery from Italy, which was going to allow them to expand their workforce and do amazing things. But when time came to update the software for this giant $1 million piece of equipment, the connectivity was so bad that it failed every time. And in fact, they had to wind up having the Rural Electric Cooperative run them a special fiber line. But the bottom line is that heavy industry firm didn't have the connectivity that they needed to be successful, to maintain the workforce, to make new investment. In fact, there was some possibility that they were going to have to shut down because they had made this investment in what could have been a useless piece of equipment. From a corporate level, do you all rely on that same level of, I mean, outside of just websites? How important is that connectivity at the big level?
So much of what we do now is web-based software. So instead of going and getting the Microsoft DVD and installing it in your computer or Adobe Acrobat, you sign up for a web service now. And if you don't have the connectivity to pull that in, you're in trouble. Upgrading equipment often happens that same way. Instead of the technician coming out, now it's dial into your system and update that piece of equipment remotely, saving tons of money and time. I was listening to a car dealer the other day complaining about how they were not able to get a lot of the recall work because so much of it is now just hooking up the system and updating it via technology instead of them having to bring the equipment in. And so they were complaining about loss of revenues due to that.
Adam, what about you? What happens from an industry perspective on your end? You already mentioned one of the big, the shiny things we've been talking about for years, which is 3D printing. But how is your business going to revolutionize over time? How do you see innovation and disruption occurring in good ways or bad for your company?
Well, as I mentioned, we've always had to evolve, so we have to pay attention to where the technology's going, how we can use that to grow our business and change. But it also works in the inverse as well. It is harder for us to market. I don't know how to catch people's attention. The cacophony of so many different trajectories of Twitter, of Facebook, of social media. How do you get them to your website? So it used to be just like lighting. You used to connect two wires, but now you've got dimmers and LED and much more complexity. I find the same thing with the marketing. We used to go to a trade show. We used to take an ad out. I have a hard time knowing how to get these new ideas in front of people, how to get their attention, how to drive them to buy it, because we don't continue unless people buy our product. So that's also the sort of darker side and the more challenging side, and the cost of this technology. So we earlier we're hearing about maybe doing two types of websites at the same time, one to target tourism, one to target new families, new people to come and reside in your community. That maintenance, that content creation, having to post 5 times a day on Facebook, there is a cost to that, and you have to have the resources to be able to deploy that effectively and concisely, so that your brand, your message is clear. That's hard, and it's hard to do well. So that's the other side of it, and knowing the algorithms that will bring you to the top of that Google page or the B&B site. That's always changing and hard to stay on top of.
You already mentioned that you have a widespread workforce all over. That opens the door to bringing in that sort of the capacity expertise, because you can reach out across the world and find folks who can help you fill those needs.
That is true, and we find many of those resources locally here too. I mean, you know, they're right here in town. We also work with people outside of town that we have existing relationships, like Brent does. You know, people that you already work well with, you know their skill set, and maybe they aren't living in Elkader, but you certainly don't want to lose that connection and that resource. And they aren't incompatible, those two thoughts. So.
Keiki, you intrigued me with some of your comments about what you're doing now. Mm-hmm. Can you see, I mean, when you think about the future, when you think about what you have the capacity to do, how does that transform what your business is going to be and how you can grow? I mean, or do you have to think about the minute, the moment, and here's what I can do? How much thinking about what's possible in a world of disruptive technologies?
Technology has been changing like every few years, and either you piggyback off it and make it work for you, or you're gonna lose it. So when the time comes to share it on social media about like tooting your horn about your business on social media, it's just putting yourself into it. People are attracted to more humans, not the corporates. They want to see who you really are. What are your values? You want they want to see the family. They want to be relating to who you are as a personality, and not people who come to the job and just do their job. They want more.
Let me ask you a question about generations. I think Ron mentioned millennials a couple of times. There's another giant wave of Gen Zers who are coming, who are just entering the workforce right now. I mean, I have 4 millennial kids, and it's been hard enough for me to keep up with them. I can't imagine what the Gen Zers are going to be like. What's your expectation for their demands on what we offer?
I think as a millennial myself, and going back to the day, thinking about it now, my dad used to turn off the router every night so I couldn't be on the internet. Like, that's what he did. And now he knows that being on internet too much is I'm telling people what I'm doing now, just being on the internet, you know. So yeah, I think sometimes our parents put a little too much expectations and a little too much restrictions that could trust your kids sometimes is, I think, what I do.
Lavern, I can't go to a hospital conference without hearing the discussions of, oh, go ahead, sorry. Yes, please.
We were talking at our table after the last conversation, the last presentation, about this idea of marketing to millennials, and how that actually can turn millennial off, that they're being, you know, bucketed and marketed to. And I have trouble too with, I like the comment about, you know, Gen plus a letter. I have a trouble with us creating these buckets of cohorts. We are a continuum. If you look around, we're all different ages, and it isn't quite that clearly defined. And I don't know that people, you know, I'm not, quote, a millennial, but the people in my cohort are interested in many of the same things, in the quality of life issues and being able to be mobile and have the capacity to be mobile, perhaps because they have created assets and have been in the workforce a long time. So I think it's more, you know, marketing should be perhaps more value-driven and interest-driven, as we see in big data and focus, rather than generationally driven.
Good point. I'm, for the record, a baby boomer, but I'm in that final phase of baby boomers where I'm much more like a Gen Xer, so you can call me what you like. Lavern,
Sure.
Disruption in healthcare. Everyone, the big buzz at hospital conferences is about, you know, Amazon and Apple and Google providing healthcare because you're wearing your Apple Watch and they can tell everything about you, which theoretically could put rural healthcare or healthcare in general at risk if everything's being done through the cloud. but there are great opportunities. I mean, just the telemedicine element to what you're already doing here in Elkader. Does disruption in healthcare concern you from an innovative or disruption end of things?
Like any other business, we have to think of other opportunities to provide services to patients. And it's not just coming to the hospital. Inpatient days historically have been trending downward for the last 15 to 20 years. So our job is, how do we customize the business model to fit what the patients of the community we serve need? And that's kind of a challenge. If you remember back in grade school, we talked about the exponential power of 10. That's what technology is doing right now. Immensely, infinity upon top to 10. It's rapidly changing, and you either have to be on it or you're going to be left behind. There are opportunities. We're trying to look at ways we can deliver care inside of the hospital better than what we're doing with technology before someone comes and says, now you have to do it this way, i.e. the government. We think we have a better opportunity to position ourselves than the government would tell us to do. And that's really being innovative, which is one of our cultural beliefs at MercyOne.
There's a sense, we talked about this yesterday when we had the doc in the box from Paris, France, talking to the lieutenant governor. There's a sense out there sometimes among patients or insurance payers that if you're a doc in the box, you're not providing the same quality of care, or it's not as good as if the doctor was sitting right in front of you.
Right.
That's not accurate.
That's not true at all. We track metrics and outcomes depending upon the level of service that we provide, and we are at the national benchmark or above when it comes to outcomes on care delivery, and it's very transformational. Like I said before, we have to be very innovative and grab that while we can, because 10 to the infinity symbol happens very quickly. And before you know it, it'll change.
At the end of the day, we live in a small town, and it's a great place to be, and there are other people in this state or in this country who should want to live in a place like this.
Absolutely.
And if they know that there's a big orange pipe running to every house, that's the opening to them.
That's correct. One of the things we could benefit from is an advanced ICN. And I talked to Chuck back in the back room about this before, and that is one of the infrastructure pieces in Iowa that needs some rebuilding or some new tooling. I'm not sure how that's going to happen because it's government owned.
We have 5 minutes left? Less than 5 minutes? Less than 5 minutes. I'm going to let... Oh, and, all right. Brent, we're going to give you the last word. Anything you... What, you know, again, you're someone who's here part of the year. You take advantage of the technology that exists. You know, as your family gets older, as your kids grow, what do you see happening as far as the amount of time you're going to be spending in our state versus where you are today?
Well, I can say that, you know, for a long time, I've been asked by people, hey, would you ever consider moving back to Iowa, especially since my wife and I are both from there? And I would say that historically, my answer had always been, I don't know how I could make that work, or, you know, what would I do? And it never seemed like a viable option. And it definitely does at this point. And so I don't know what the coming years hold, but I'm excited about continuing to find ways to get connected in the McGregor community. I think there's tremendous untapped potential there. And I think that the answer to that question is evolving for sure, but it's been absolutely amazing to give my kids exposure to the area. We live in a little townhouse in South Boston that is just scrunched next to hundreds of other townhouses that look exactly like it. And it was pretty amazing when my kids got to set up their sweet corn stand on Main Street in McGregor this summer. That was something we probably couldn't have done in 7th Street in South Boston. And so it's, you know, I look forward to continuing to get to know a lot of you. And I would say it's timely in that yesterday, the state auditor, Rob Sand, who grew up in Decorah, is a friend of mine, went to college with him, just announced a statewide jobs plan where actually they're moving more of the state auditor positions to the local communities where where the work actually needs to be done instead of spending all the time driving from Des Moines all over the place. And so I think you're even seeing that happen at a government level. And in the press release, he noted in his survey of employees that people, literally Elkader was one of the towns when he surveyed the auditor staff of where they wish they could work and live from. So check that out if you haven't followed that piece. And I think it's reflective of the kind of trends we're going to see in the coming years. Also, if you want to stay in touch, you have my name there in the program. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. Also on Twitter. And if you really thought we got along, throw me a note on Facebook. You pick.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being part of this. In case we lose you, he did mention some of the energy that's going on in places like Cedar Rapids and Des Moines and Iowa City. It's also happening in small towns. So that sort of tech-based impact work is really exciting. All right, 30 seconds each. Sure, yes. Closing comments, just how excited you are to have big pipes of fiber.
I'm excited about big pipes. In closing, I think what I would like to say is don't let this 4 hours that you spent this morning go to waste. Go back and adapt some new piece of technology, learn something new today, put something you heard today into practice.
I'm just excited about the future possibilities, about what we've talked about 5G and the speed and what that will bring in terms of connectivity. And Brent, I really recommend you just move here. I did it, it worked for me, it'll work for you.
I am very excited for the big pipes, so I could see my parents a little clearly, probably. And I don't know, just I've always liked technology, the way it's going. Virtual reality is another thing that we could see. Before my husband visited India, through virtual reality, he could see where I grew up, which school I went to, which streets I walked, everything. So this is just gonna be better.
Well, big pipes are great. What I want you to take from this today is I challenge you to be thinking about current state, here's how we do something currently, and then future state is what is the new technology I can embrace and adapt to fit my business or whatever I'm doing. And then in the middle is that action plan. How do I get from current state to future state and move it that way, because that's where it's going.
Well, thank you all for being part of this panel. I'll just point out that fiber is a great thing. It makes the world go round. It also enables other technologies. We don't have a farmer, for example, on this panel. They are absolutely, reliant on access to technology through wireless or direct Wi-Fi or 5G. So there's a whole generation of other technologies that fiber feeds that's also going to change. I mean, the whole issue of wearables. So it's exciting to think about. And to be in a place where you're already so far ahead of many other places is even better. So thanks again for being here.